Our final speaker in this session is Laura Dove, who is a fourth-year PhD student at UC Berkeley in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management. She's originally from New Hampshire, and her research focuses on the dynamic relationships between plants and healing within rapidly changing ecological, economic, and social landscapes in the Peruvian Amazon. Laura is going to speak to us today about healing as an ecology of selves, ritual as resistance, research as ritual. Let's welcome Laura.
Well, thanks so much for having me here. Thanks, Elizabeth and Kim, for inviting me. I'm just going to go right into it because I think I have a lot to say. But so I'm kind of going to focus on this multi-species awareness that I think we've been talking a lot about, connections with nature, relationships between humans and the environment, but I'd like to kind of fill in some of the environmental beings, some of the earth beings that exist in the ecology of selves that we find ourselves in. And I think that this web is arguably, the web of multi-species beings is arguably what makes us human. So forging tighter multi-species connections might mean that through collective imaginaries, we allow ourselves to become sensitive to the collective web that we exist within. So I'm going to talk about a way of viewing the world that integrates our humanity in and as a network of selves that's human and other than human beings, and particularly plants. And I'm focusing on medicinal plants that come from the Peruvian Amazon. And I'm borrowing the term ecology of selves from Eduardo Kohn. And he uses the ecology of selves to speak of the many voices and agencies that occupy our inner and outer landscapes, and that we are always becoming with. The lineage that I've learned from has been Amazonian, and my primary teachers have been Shipibo healers of Peru who live on the Ucayali River, a tributary of the Amazon. I'm going to draw on my own personal experiences and also referring to a series of interviews that I conducted with Shipibo healers. And I particularly want to acknowledge my two main teachers from the Mawa family, Hakorata and Soimani. I also want to be careful because I don't have the authority to speak on behalf of the Shipibo as a people or as a community, and my views don't necessarily reflect those of my teachers. And I also have strong regrets that I'm relying a lot on white anthropologists who write about indigenous worldviews rather than indigenous scholars, so I apologize for that, but that's just where I'm at right now. So in addition to Eduardo Kohn, I'm also drawing on Marisol de la Cadena and Eduardo Viveros de Castro, who describes the Amazonian worldview, which he calls perspectivism. So according to perspectivism, a body, human or other than human, can be conceptualized as a bundle of affect similar to clothing and other adornments. Each body offers a window or a perspective into a distinct relational world, and these worlds overlap and interpenetrate with each other based on the web of relations. So this idea is called multinaturalism. And so it's similar to this picture here, where the truth presents itself differently depending on the position of the observer. But the one difference is that in this picture, we seem to have a objective view of what's going on, and we can see that it's a cylinder. Donna Haraway refers to this myth of objectivity as the God trick, in which we can assume that we could stand nowhere and know everything. And so in perspectivism, there's only embodied knowledge. Haraway calls this situated knowledge. So Shipibo concepts of health link social, ecological, and bodily health, and include health of all our relationships. So healing then integrates the body within the community, and with other earth beings in the ecology of selves. Discord within the relationships can result in disease in the body. Shipibo healers use certain trees and other plants as having the capacity to teach, heal, sing, and embody human form. Shipibo healing rituals bridge communication across species lines through the performance of songs and the personification of plants. In my own understanding, healing can be viewed as a type of embodied orientation or engagement with the world that has the potential to reach across boundaries of the skin, blur distinctions between self and other, and allow for both transpersonal and trans-species reconciliation. The way that I'm conceptualizing healing is also as an ethical stance that orients us as we're always becoming. The Shipibo system of dieting plants is the method by which healers learn from a teacher or plant spirit. And this is by making the body a very quiet and empty place and engaging through dreams and visions. Then the healer learns to communicate with and personify the plant. This is often with the help, but not always, with the consumption of an entheogenic tea commonly known as ayahuasca or yahe. This is a quote from one of my interviews. No one taught me or explained to me about the plants, telling me what they were. Nothing. I dreamed. While I slept, sometimes they called me. Don't go to sleep, let's talk. That's what they said to me. When I walked around, I heard it all over. But when I would turn around, there were just plants. But in my mind, I could converse just like that. The plants also want to make us live unified with them. And when we diet, even more so. When I wanted to diet, they would appear right here and take me into the forest. So with the help of many beautiful teachers, human and plants alike, I've been learning very slowly how to listen to plants. It's been a continuous process of becoming more and more aware and attuned. Last week I had the opportunity to commune with some of my plant teachers after a long absence, and I actually was preparing for this talk, and so I asked them what I should tell you today, and they began to counsel me as if I was having a meeting with my advisors. So I'm going to share with you some of these things. So they first told me to share with you what I just have, which is how I had asked them for guidance and how they'd been teaching me. And then they began telling me more stories, which I'll try to translate into human language. So the story begins with names. The plants wanted me to invoke their indigenous names because they say that speaking the words actually puts our mouths into configurations that are themselves healing. And that's actually similar in a lot of traditions. I know, I think it's the same for actually invoking Kuan Yin. So I thought that maybe we could all say the names together. So I'm going to start, I'll say it and then you can repeat after me. So this is the first. It's a vine of many names, not just these, but it's commonly known as Kapi, Yahe, Nishi, Chagubi, and Ayahuasca. Ayahuasca's partner is commonly mixed with it in the tea. It's called chacruna. And then sometimes another plant is used, and the name of this one is called chaliponga or chagroponga. And then some other less well-known plants that I'm also familiar with. This one is called Chirek Sanango, Neue Rau, and Bobinsana. Thank you. So the power of the sonic and sensual features of voice are actually central to Amazonian concepts of power and healing. And song is a very central role. Songs that are generated between plants and humans. So these plants have been in relationship with humans for a long time. In Amazonian mythology, the plants and animals tell stories about people, and these stories help to construct their own identities and histories as well as our own. So the plants told me that they created us. They gave their bodies up to become us. Roots, leaves, stems, and fruit are somehow metabolized and alchemized into animal-human flesh. In a very material way, all of the carbon in our bodies has at some point in time passed through the chloroplast of a plant. Indeed, these plants feature prominently in creation stories for many peoples, and they wish to be recognized in this role. The plants also showed me that each plant spirit constitutes its own world. Much of the gorgeous artwork that I'm showing here, as you probably gathered, has been inspired by these plant worlds. In thinking about my work with Shipibo healers and how to come to terms with appropriating their voices and the voices of plants, I think a lot about multi-voicedness and who's allowed to speak from the collection of voices that make up my identity. The colonial process usually imposes a singular understanding of the world onto its subjects. This is the story of the hegemonic narrative becoming dominant and drowning out other songs and voices. The dominant narrative has become self-referential, impervious to the voices of plants, of glaciers, of indigenous peoples, of any dissenting human subjects. And this is what my advisor, Carolyn Merchant, describes as the death of nature, or the process by which other than human beings and their human allies were silenced, and a mechanistic worldview came into dominance, in which the earth was seen as a dead machine. So I'm exploring this idea of ritual as a type of resistance. Rituals are present in all societies and serve as structured and symbolic processes involving the performance of culture and the reproduction of the life world. So the life world, as described by Habermas, describes shared understandings, meanings, and values that are constructed socially over time and are transmitted culturally. The life worlds require constant reaffirmation, and the colonization of a life world by a system can result in a crisis, which is accompanied by the loss of cultural meaning, solidarity, and sense of community. So these are ontological conflicts. In my view, Shipibo healing rituals serve not only to reproduce the Shipibo life world, but they facilitate direct, unmediated connection with other than human beings. These boundary crossings can serve as powerful challenges to any hierarchical social system. So these are organized processes by which more of the selves in the ecology of selves are given voice. And thereby more matter within the body or ecosystem becomes animated. These rituals confuse the boundaries between human and plant, self and other, blurring hierarchies of animacy and bridging material and spirit realms. These plants are then included in the social process of subject formation, which involves listening, mimicry, and exchange. And it's a mattering of worlds, of other worlds. Here's another quote from my interview that I think demonstrates this blurring of boundaries between plants and people. The children already have plants in their bodies. They are already cured. But the plant's wills at any moment can emerge from their hearts, because it comes from their mother. When she was pregnant, she would take plants, and they receive that. When they are born, they are children of the plants, of life. That's why we, the Shipibo, when we are sick, we take plants. When we are pregnant, we take plants, so that the children receive. That is how they are born, and when they are born, that is how they grow. So, as a white woman from North America working in indigenous communities in Peru, I've struggled a lot with what my role is as a researcher and how I can conduct my work in a way that's not simply a form of neocolonialism and doesn't perpetuate racialized colonial hierarchies. And that's probably going to be an ongoing struggle for me. But getting away from the imperialist type of research involves moving attention from disembodied thoughts to using the feeling sense as the primary source of information. This is affective experiential learning, similar to how one learns in Shipibo knowledge systems. So I'm exploring the idea of using using ritual as a framework for approaching research as a potential decolonial methodology. Research, like ritual, is a repeatable and mimetic process whose structure is taught to initiates. In fact, right now we're in the middle of another type of academic ritual, which involves a continually evolving performance of culture that simultaneously constructs the performer and the audience. So viewing academic practices as ritual, I think, can be useful in situating them in their own cultural context, rather than universalizing them. Likewise, in being inducted into Shipibo ways of knowing, it feels important to me to do so in a ritual context, which is under the guidance of Shipibo healers and plant teachers, and not necessarily on my own terms. I think it's important to understand the rituals we're performing and to enact them very consciously, very delicately, very intentionally, with full awareness of the hierarchies and social structures that we may or may not be reproducing. Linda Tuhiwai-Smith explores the potential for a decolonial research methodology that unseats the hierarchy between researcher and the researched as subject-object relationship, particularly in indigenous communities. I suggest that by focusing research as a ritual boundary crossing, there's a potential for an emancipatory move from a research system that's linked to a long and violent history of imperialism and colonialism. So if we approach our research rituals and our boundary crossings with the ethical stance of healing, we can bring ourselves into relationship in a felt way with an ecology of other selves. And I believe this is particularly important, as most of you are probably concerned with, when working with the earth and with earth beings, human and other than human beings, whose subjugated voices we may wish to bring into the political arena. When researchers turn earth beings into objects of research, we strangle the very thing that we wish to know. So I suggest it becomes the researcher's role not to attain any sort of authoritative understanding, but to listen. To allow other voices to speak and be heard, and to allow their sounds to expand one's own identity enough to encompass multiple narratives and multiple worlds, without the need to offer interpretation, and perhaps with an understanding that they may never be understood, but that the voices can still transform us. So thanks so much for your attention today, and happy to continue the conversation later.